So we've had our first snow.
Yes, we did. It was hard to get evidence of it, but
I know. I always compete with my brother in Vermont that we get more snow, so it's hard to show that in a photograph. It's like piling siblings. Mm-mm-mm.
how many
Mm-mm.
are there? Five?
There's just four of us. I'm number three. You're number.
I'm number three, but I'm the baby.
I was the baby until they had a baby.
I guess
So
my brother can say that too.
I think so. Yes. So it looks like the culvert is getting done.
It is.
We were
Nothing stopped
kayaking.
it. It's in.
We were kayaking out there Friday. I can't believe we were, but it started. It was really, they were working hard, and it's like, yes.
Oh, they were out there today. I went down to check because when it kept snowing after it was supposed to stop, I was like, wonder how the culvert guys are doing in the snow. They were just going for it. They're fine. We're gonna get it done.
So we have to have a culvert party. Should we have a band and do a little dance on it, or what do you think?
Well, by the time we get to be on it, there's going to be a live road on it. So it'd probably be good to close the road if we do that.
Yeah, nobody would notice.
But
They
if
wouldn't
we
care.
say close on road, people are going to get so mad.
Oh,
Tired of
yes.
that.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
maybe on the opening, we can have a big party the morning it opens. And just
yes,
go
really
down.
early. Well, was it when the dam was completed? Didn't you? David Dan was there, and you
Well,
poured water over the dam, or
well, my first July 2009 was the year that we commemorated the dam, and I had a state town partnership, a municipal state partnership was the big theme, and I got buckets, and all the legislators threw water over the dam. Really
it's just water over the dam.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a good short but commemorative event.
I think we need another something for this, But you're right, closing the road would probably not
No,
make happy.
don't close the road now, April. That would be a bad event.
I'm going to miss all the traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why it was nice putting kayaks in at the launch ramp, and then you can paddle around and not have to go on the detour. Because you don't. But Jim Hemingway, you're not going to be sad to miss the road closure, are you? No. But I can only imagine what a drag this has been for you.
Oh, it's been for everybody who lives around the lake. No one's happy about it.
Mm-mm. And then you're stuck driving on Montague Road, either one.
Yeah, well, the potholes apparently are pretty bad on Montague Road, according to those who have to drive that route. And they aren't great on Wendell Road either.
No.
Well, the highway crew has been grading constantly. So I have not found that to be the case, Jim. There were potholes maybe the day before Steve started, but I haven't seen hardly any since.
Well, I'm just reporting what people tell me.
Yeah. No, they've been really working to keep those roads in good order.
But it's not slowing traffic. People are driving way too fast.
Yeah, that's a problem. Is the November 17th opening still valid, Becky?
Looking good, looking good.
I mean, I've been watching the construction every day. I go down there and take a look, and they seem to be doing fine. It's just a matter of, and the road's now up to grade, so it's just a matter of paving it and putting in the guardrails and doing all that kind of cosmetic stuff.
And they have to do the slopes first. They have to have not the gardeners, but they need to put in the loam and seed on either side.
Yeah, yeah, it's rather bare now and could
Yeah,
easily
they have
wash
to do
away.
that before they can do the paving and the guardrails, but
Yeah.
it's
But we will
really
have to,
close. The grade is set, I think.
but we do have to celebrate. That's
So
been
Jim
3 years.
Jim Walton's missing? Is he expected
Uh,
though?
I got an email from Jim this afternoon that he's not going to be able to make it tonight. So I think we have our crew for this evening. So thanks. I hope everybody had a good Halloween. Becky, did you get to give lots of candy out?
I got about 30 kids.
That's a good number.
Oh,
It was worth being there for sure. Oh, they're so, yeah, it's fun to see the different costumes every year. They change and there's all these characters. I have no clue who they are. You know, especially my grandson. What is he? What? Oh my God. But
Oh
it was
my
really
God.
fun. Thank you guys for accommodating, and the town commons went very well. Grace does a thing on the commons where she has the Halloween trick-or-treaters get to vote on what kind of candy she'll keep in her candy jar for the next year. So she to vote, the Halloween trick-or-treaters have to say what they are. So the tally of the election is all, you know, it's Batman and all these characters. It's so, and it's right on her desk. It's really wonderful.
So what was the winning candy?
Yes.
It used to be the Dum-Dums, those lollipops, and now it's a ring the ring.
Ooh, do we have that in our budget?
Well, this has all been funded outside. She gets a lot of donations.
I bet she does.
And I think the first one was a big box of candy from another town clerk out in Arizona or somewhere. It's been a wonderful thing.
Wow, that's great.
Great. All right, well, let's kick off our meeting. So I think we'll start with reviewing the minutes from October 17th. I just went through these. Did everybody have a chance to look at them?
Yep.
Bob?
Just one thing, just a misspelling on number 6, regional school. It says REGINAL, so I believe that should be changed.
Yeah,
I had a
on-
que-
I did.
Oh, yeah, I found it.
6B.
and Susie?
Yep.
Item number 1F, affect should be effect. Yes, that is just typo stuff, you know, nothing.
What was that? Which one was that?
1F,
Oh, F. All right. Okay,
And in number 1C,
yep.
it says relatively high EQV. I think we should probably define what EQV is.
Okay.
yeah.
You mean
yeah.
just say the
Yeah, yeah, the
Not
acronym,
define
you know, we all understand it, but anybody reading the minutes might not.
Okay.
Equalized values, equalized
Valuation.
Quantitative,
I'll find out. Don't worry about it.
quants.
Okay. Any other suggestions?
no,
Okay.
it looked good.
Yep.
Oh, I think it's just equalized valuations.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I'll make a motion to approve the October 17th minutes as amended here.
And I'll second.
Overnight sign.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, I.
Ashu, aye.
Mosier, aye.
Stein abstain. I wasn't there.
Okay. So that passes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 0 with 1 abstention. Okay, thanks, Susie.
Yeah.
Next up, so I'm gonna do a little kind of swap here. We were going to talk about, kind of follow up on that conversation about chapter 70, sort of background research. I haven't had a chance to do anything in the last couple of weeks. It's been crazy. So I'm gonna, I have a couple things I kind of was hoping to do. And so I think we'll just table that till our next meeting. But if somewhat related, I thought we could just briefly talk about this sort of policy statement document that I shared around
Yeah.
earlier. So let me see. I'm going to just share my screen. Okay, so just I guess maybe for April's benefit, right, April, you
I-
weren't at the last meeting, right?
I wasn't, but I did watch it on TV.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I watched I did watch the movie. It was really, really good.
It's hair raising.
Yeah.
Always suspenseful.
So yeah, so I can, I think the context here is just wanting to be not to disseminate this, but unless a need to do that develops, but really more just to sort of help prepare us for the possibility that we may need to do some advocacy for our preferred assessment method. And I think there are a couple of reasons to think why this might be a little bit more challenging this year than it has been, or at least was the last year. One being there's a ton of turnover within the regional school committee, and so I think there's a little bit of a kind of unknown as to sort of how supportive they're going to continue to be for this method. And also just that I think there are going to be sort of financial pressures on the budget that are going to be more serious this year. And I think that's going to be because the district's just not going to have access to some funding sources that were used, kind of pandemic related funding sources that were used to kind of balance the budget the last few budget cycles, and that's not going to be available. And so I think so anyway, that was the context. A lot of the text for this was just sort of modification of a letter we sent to the former superintendent and the regional school committee, I think two years ago. We were sort of at that point, the district hadn't yet adopted the current modified statutory. We were sort of making our position clear. So I just sort of adapted that document. All right. So any questions or suggestions? Bob, I see your hand up. You want to start us off?
Yeah, I just want to, I appreciate you setting this. It really does reflect a long process that we ultimately, I think we nudged the regional school into that position. I think it's a good place for us that we're at now. And hopefully it'll stay. But a couple of things that work in our favor. One of them is we were working against the status quo ante when we were trying to convert the region into a system that we recommended. That is what we see in front of us here, the statutory method with the 5-year rolling average. So it's amended. It's still an alternative method. And so given that this has sort of been set up as the way we do business down there, it is going to be harder for them to change it than it was for them to keep the status quo before. That's my opinion anyway. Secondly, we had an alternative method in place in the first place. We were not in favor of keeping it that. We were in favor of moving towards statutory. But anything that they could conceivably come up with is going to be an alternative method, which requires consensus. So I think that works in our favor too, If there's, you're right, there's been a lot of turnover, there's some unpredictability here. But I think that this is the way that the school has been doing it, and that will work in our favor, I believe, this year. And hopefully it will be the system going forward.
Mhm. All right. Yeah, I certainly hope so. George.
The comment you made about, and the comment, and Bob too, about the turnover, I think the turnover could help us because people who battled against, people who were voting in support in the other towns in support of the old method, they're all pretty much gone. I mean, there are still 2 or 3 around. One in particular I would be concerned about. I think the others aren't really going to make an issue of it. So, to some extent, I think we might want to see how, if this even comes up. I think Doug is really behind the method we're using now and isn't really questioning it. I think he's going to be happy to be able to have to only run one method and show one method at the 4 town meetings. So, I think the turnover might be in our favor, especially the last school committee really came up with an answer and everybody seemed to accept it. The other thing I would say is when we talk about this method, it was a method that we pushed and recommended, but remember this method was put together by a group. It was a working group of the 4 towns in collaboration with the finance director at the time and also the superintendent at the time. And so it's not necessarily our method. It's a method that the towns all came up with together in reality.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important point. Not to say that it's what Shutesbury says should happen. It was we did push for the statutory all along. There's no question. But what we've come up with, the 5-year rolling on the minimum contribution, it's a collaborative effort among the towns. And I think that's an important point that the town, people in the other committees need to understand. And then I did have a couple edits on it, suggested edits, if now was an okay time to talk about that.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, in the second paragraph, as towns, we remain steadfast that 100% statutory method represents the fairest. I would qualify that by either defining, I would say our position that the modified 100% mandatory, modified. I guess you do say it. I apologize. Because I'd put in brackets with a 5-year rolling average. I tried to define it, but I don't think you need to do that. I think you did that down below. And the second part, so I would say nothing there. Sorry I said anything at all. And then the second sentence, therefore, we support making the current assessment method permanent as a part of a new regional agreement. I might say as a part of an amended regional agreement, but that's up to you, AJ. That's not a big deal. And then in number 3, I had a note here. I think we don't need to tell everybody the very last end of the sentence where it says if it is unanimously approved by all towns. I think everybody knows that. I don't know that we need to point that out.
Do you think that's true? Like as opposed to the 2/3? I guess.
Well, because everybody brings it to their town meetings on a warrant article. I'm not saying take it out. I'm just saying I'm not sure it's necessary. That was just my gut reaction when I read it.
Yeah.
If everybody thinks it's a good sentence to keep, that I'm not going to argue with it. And then grammatically in number 4, we have advocated for a 5-year rolling average minimum contribution. I would comma and say which produces a more stable, predictable distribution. You said the important point in the first sentence, and then you make this comment, we have advocated for the 5-year rolling average. But I would emphasize that because it produces, and I think you say that, but I think if you combine it into one sentence. So I just modified it to say method which produces, again, whatever you think, it's fine with me. Yeah. And I would then, in the second to last sentence, I would refer to it as though it currently results in higher assessments for our town. Because in the long run, it balances. In the long run, everybody pays the same amount they would have under the statutory method because it would have equalized, you know what I mean? Because we're using an average. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does.
So that's why I wouldn't necessarily result in a higher assessment. It may or may not this year result in a higher assessment for us. And in the long run, there are going to be years when it actually, that's not a true statement. So those are my comments.
Okay, that's good. And I think to your first point, I'll work on, I think that's actually an excellent point. I should make it clear in one of these bullets here that the current method reflects a the collaborative work of of all member towns.
Right, through,
Yeah, 'cause I don't, you're right, that like people, not everybody that's gonna be participating in this, in this year's discussion about this is gonna have that knowledge, and so we should make that clear. So I'll
Yeah,
add something.
what we pushed for was the conversation to talk about the assessment methods. And we did push for the 100%, but the modified version is what is collaborative. And one other thing I think is important too, when we refer to the statutory method, is not only is it fair and equitable, but it's also an independent method. The 4 stakeholders in the assessment for the Amherst Regional Schools don't make up this formula. We can't manipulate it. If we're using a standard, if you will. I just throwing that out there for something to think about if you're thinking about future edits as well.
Yeah.
All right, I'm done.
Thanks, that was super helpful. Bob?
I just want to ask a question here for clarification for me. I mean, George has suggested we put an amended regional agreement. I'm not sure that anything where there's an alternative method will be permanently part of an agreement, a regional agreement. Is that true or not?
Well,
How did we get
I
here?
think we have
It
to
has to be
vote
voted
it.
every
the
year.
regional agreement right now states a 5-year rolling average of enrollment, and that's an alternative method.
Yeah.
Right, okay. But it doesn't stipulate the amount of statutory, like the system we were using 10 years ago was not stipulated in the agreement.
Never. That's why we always have that.
Right, so that was always negotiable.
That's why we always have that warrant article every year to approve the alternative method.
Right. So the other thing I wanted to bring up was that I noticed what's missing from this is any mention of the guardrails, which is something we did concede, which is not, it does not even itself out, but it's something that is part of the way that we're currently doing business. The last 2 years we did business, and I expect we'll be doing it again this year. And so is there any reason to include any of that?
So that was one of my questions I was going to raise tonight. The sense I've gotten from our previous discussions about it is that, let me try this out, that we view the guardrails as not a necessary component of this method, but sort of one that we've been kind of willing to support because of the sort of big picture view that it's sort of moved us to this formula, which is what we really advocate for and believe in. So that's my sense of how we've kind of how in previous discussions sort of where we've landed on the guardrails. And so for that reason, so my instinct was to leave it out of this document, but I'm happy to.
I think it's good. That's my sense too.
Susie.
Part of this document is to inform a bunch of people who never participated in this process about where it's at. And so for that reason, I think the guardrail should be included and probably in section 4. Somehow reflect that is part of the agreement. There are not only new school committee members, there are going to be a lot of town council members, and we got in one of those 4 town meetings, there were counselors that came with absolutely no information who attacked it. So I feel like we have to lay it down, and we don't have to hand it over until we find ourselves in that position, but it should include the pieces that are in the agreement. That's my opinion.
Okay. Any other thoughts about this guardrails?
Yeah, I'm surprised that they're not actually part of the agreement. Are you sure that they're separate from the agreement, the guardrails?
Well,
or are they part of the agreement?
They've been part of the last 2 years. There was language in the assessment method warrant articles that every town passed, and so it was, the guardrails was part of that. I think yeah, it's probably fair to say, if your point is that it's part of the formula that we've
Yeah.
used the last 2 years.
Yes, then it should be, then include it.
It's in the warrant article.
Right,
Okay, I think it should be included.
Yeah,
It's
it's not in,
important.
it's not in the agreement. It's just in the alternative method that we have in the warrant article, as Susie says.
And
Okay.
and we don't really have I don't think we have really a full signed agreement. I think what we've been doing is making a arrangement from year to year so far. We used to have an agreement, but we're pretty far from what that was.
Well, I think the old agreement is still, the last agreement that was signed, which is probably decades old, is what we're always voting to override.
Right,
I mean, I guess alternative method.
Yes.
right.
So we have to do it every year.
Yes.
But I do
Right.
think that I agree with you, AJ, in that we accepted this and we voted to approve this method with the guardrail because we knew that Pelham was going to take a major hit the first year, that they would benefit from the guardrail. And we saw it as a transitional thing that would not be necessary or even advisable a couple of years after the dust settled on the transition to this method that you've described here. And also that's number one. So I do think that it'd be wise to leave it out of this paper because this paper actually represents our position, which didn't include. So if we need to express our position, which we're hoping we don't have to do, and obviously if the guardrail comes into play, we won't make a big stink out of it. We might discuss it, but there's no need for us to include it in our position because it wasn't in our position in the first place. And I think that it's less equitable than the system that's described here, that is the statutory with the 5-year rolling average.
So, I mean, I guess one way to sort of think about this is if there was an appetite and willingness to reopen the current regional agreement and kind of memorialize this assessment method as part of that agreement, right? Which is sort of the point I make somewhere in here. I can't remember where. But yeah, sort of an interest we would be support, right? That's something we would certainly be supportive of because it would make that the default method that would then need to be modified by an alternative method as and so if the goal, if we think of this as, okay, what would we want that revised regional agreement to look like? Would it include anything about guardrails or not? I mean, that's an open question. I'm not sure that I don't think I have the answer to that.
Yeah.
Well, it's up to the 4 towns.
What's that?
It'll be up to the 4 towns. If we get to
Right.
that point where it's time to modify the agreement, there's going to be a meeting and it's a conversation.
Of course. But I guess in terms of what we're sort of bringing to that discussion, like this is how we would like to that regional agreement. This is how we would like it to be revised. Is it if this set of points here is supposed to reflect our position in terms of what we would want that revised agreement to say about assessment method, would that include something about guardrails or would it not? I mean, I think we all agree that push comes to shove, that's a point we're willing to sort of be flexible about. But is it something that we would raise and we would bring up as, well, we think this is part of the assessment method we would like to see reflected in that?
Well, what does our committee really think? I mean, because you can conduct a straw poll right now and see what do we really think about it. We know Bob's against it, but I'm not so sure that I'm against it. I kind of like the 4% because it protects us.
Yeah, so it's a sort of another level of sort of protection against kind of equalizing the changes, dramatic changes that any one town might experience from one year to the next. I see
4% on our budget for us is a big amount of money.
I see Jim's hand up, but Jim.
Yeah, well, I agree with Bob on this one. We weren't the ones who brought up the guardrails to begin with, as I think he said and others have pointed to. In fact, I think it was Doug Slaughter, wasn't it? And the other thing is, what?
It was Mike
It was
Morris.
Mike Morris. Okay. Well, it wasn't something that we broadcasted or created, but it seems to me that the guardrails come up when the preliminary calculations show that there is somebody who's one of the three towns are above 4%, and if that doesn't, in other words, it happens when there's enough imbalance or whatever in the calculations that show that one town, whether it's Pelham, Shutesbury, or Leverett, it is over 4%, and then people bring up the guardrails. I think that's sort of the way it's evolved, hasn't it?
Yeah. So how do you feel about that? Do you think that's a good idea to have that?
Well, I don't think you need to state it necessarily in this agreement that you're proposing. I think it'll come up naturally on its own.
Got it. Okay, Susie, and then Bob, and then April.
I think we've had this discussion at length before, and so
Yeah.
I'm just in favor of having a straw poll or just a poll right now so that we know whether this group of people would want it to be seen as part of Shutesbury's position. In the case where it goes over 4%, do we want to have such a thing as a guardrail?
All right, Bob.
Yes, I just like very briefly, the reason that I was opposed to it is because I supported the transition to the statutory method because considered to be a more equitable, better way to distribute the cost. But the guardrail system is not equitable in this sense, because as George pointed out, with the 5-year rolling average, that would even out the shock of a change in the assessment from 1 year to the next by averaging 5 years. Yeah, that's true. And as he pointed out as well, nobody will be actually saving any money. They'll just be averaging out the change, softening the change to make it easier to budget for. But the guardrail is not like that at all. If you have a small town, and only the small towns would be affected by the guardrail because Amherst is so big that their changes in their enrollment wouldn't really activate this guardrail. We would then, if you changed your enrollment, like if Shutesbury had all of a sudden had a bulge or ballooning enrollment for a given year, then its assessment could change, sort of dramatically in 1 year, and this guardrail would prevent that from happening. So would the rolling average, of course, would soften it. So the guardrail would then, that money that was saved by the town of Shutesbury with the guardrail provision would never come back to the other towns, even though Shutesbury had a bulge in its enrollment, which they should actually pay for in all fairness, because they have more students coming in to the region. So I don't have a problem with that. I think that we could plan for that, and the finance committee and the school committee could plan for it, because before they get to the region, they've already been in our elementary, our K-6 system, and they know that these kids are coming down the pike, and we have to plan to budget for the assessment to change when they arrive at the regional school. So I don't like the guardrail. I don't think it's equitable, and that's why I would suggest that we don't include it in this document.
Thank you. Okay, April.
Well, I think the 5-year rolling average is absolutely another level of guardrail, probably a better level of guardrail that exists. But I think our putting it out there is really showing good faith to the other towns in the region, that we don't want any one town, including us, to be slammed in a particular year. And it seems unlikely given how the structure of the 5-year rolling average. But I think it's important to, I think it's a good faith message.
All right, George.
Yeah, I'll just say real quick, it is a good faith because the other towns went along with the method we're currently using now. And one of the things that got them to come along was that 4% guardrail, was the guardrail. But I would just say that I think I agree with the comments that say there's no reason to address it in this document. I think we're really pushing to get we really want the regional assessment agreement to be modified for the current method we're using. And if the towns all decide that they'd like to have the guardrail, that's a conversation we're going to need to address and have a position on. At this point, I think if we leave it out of here, we can just let this issue slide for now and we can talk about it later. I do think the 4% is good, but I don't think we need to put it in this document.
All right, so I think we have a good sense of how the group feels about this, and I think what's clear to me is that it's something that we would be willing to accept if we felt like it would help us sort of continue down this path. And I think some of us feel like it's a genuinely good idea. But I think, there's probably not consensus on that point, whereas everything, I think, on this paper, I mean, I haven't heard anybody push back on anything that's written down here. So I think there's clear consensus among our group, among the select board, among the school committee about this. So why don't we leave the document as is, and we'll see how the guardrails discussion plays out. Susie?
Good.
So is this gotta go to the school committee and the select board?
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea, right? Okay, so I'm gonna make one change because I thought George had a really helpful suggestion. So I'm gonna do that as a follow-up. I'll send this, if it's okay with you guys, I think I'll then just send it to the rest of you, but then also the school committee and the select board, and ask them to review it, make sure they're comfortable with the contents.
And alert
And I'll
them
make
that alert them that it's not going out automatically to the 4 towns.
Right.
Yes,
Yes.
I will make it clear that this is, for now, this is meant to be just kind of an internal document that is just sort of helps us all as, 3 groups that are involved in this discussion, help us sort of prepare and speak. I think, the point is like we speak with a kind of collective voice about this issue. I think that's important. I feel like over the years that I've been involved in the finance committee, I think we've gotten better about talking about this issue as with a kind of consistent message, and I think that's helped us. So I want to kind of reinforce that. So okay, cool. Let me get this off the screen. Thanks for your comments, and I'll send an updated version.
Thanks.
All right. Okay, next up, alternative budget format. So George shared yet a new version of kind of mock-up of it that did some further consolidation, sort of beyond what he showed at our last meeting. Did everybody have a chance to look at that? All right,
Yep.
this is way too small. Let me pull this up. Okay.
Way too small.
How's that?
Closer.
I can do even better.
That's even, yes. This is an eye exam.
I'm gonna fail.
George, do you want to just briefly explain kind of what is different about this version from the one you shared at the last meeting?
If I can remember, give me one second. So
I think there were certain departments where you didn't do the same collapsing of
Yeah.
all of the expenses into one line. I think that was things like maybe the treasurer and the collector. I can't quite remember. There were certain.
oh, that's what it was. You're right. So that's what it is. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah, my brain is not what it used to be. So yeah, I left all salary lines on the schedule. So in a department like the assessors, where there was multiple employees, I had multiple lines, one for each employee. It was for the head count, you may recall, that I was referring to, so we could see what the head count is in each department. Now, all those lines are consolidated, condensed, whatever. And so that was the big one. And there were some other, I think that was mostly what this difference is. It bought us more lines for sure, and it definitely tightened up the schedule. I think it looks nice. I think what we're looking at on the screen here looks great. My biggest concern, I mean, my one concern, of course, was maintaining this, and I think we could probably manage that. My other concern is how are people going to react to this on town floor? But it certainly looks good.
So,
People who,
yeah, I think this is an important discussion, right? So I think I'd like to hear from everybody about sort of kind of what their level of support is. I'll share my thoughts in a minute. April?
Yeah, I've certainly thought a lot about this, and first of all, is this being driven by our town moderator? A suggestion, was this coming from the community? I mean, that's a question that came up as I listened to the discussion that you'd had at the last meeting. One thing that concerns me with this is that we're asking our town administrator to really have two different budgets and maintain two very different budgets that I think, as they're presented to town meeting, I think there were ideas that it would be online, they'd be on different color paper, there'd be something. I think people are going to be confused by it. One part of this change that I would not want to lose is the department head's ability to sort of manage their own, the micro lines in each of their departments, their operating expenses. That was a part that I was really drawn to, that would be a good thing. I know that's not everybody agrees with that. But I worry that we're doing this, and George, this does look beautiful. I don't want to take away from your art. It really, it is clean. But I'm not sure if we have to still maintain publicly two different records. I'm not sure it's the right thing to do.
I can answer one of April's questions. It was initiated by the town moderator, but we've also were told by a consultant from FERCog who was working with Becky, and I think, the finance committee, about how we report things. One of the reasons we changed the revenue, and apparently a lot of towns do it this way. It's a very common thing. So
Okay.
That's why we're at this point. I'm not taking position.
But do other towns have to, sort of have these two different budgets?
I don't think so.
Because that's the part that I really get caught up in. That sounds like it's really putting way more work and stress on a town administrator. And it could certainly open up to more confusion for people. It's like, why is it this way and why is it not that way? I mean, I think that's where, yes, anyway.
Yeah, no, I think the point's well taken. So I have some thoughts that I wanted to share about this. So I think, my feeling is that this is a good idea. I'm supportive of it primarily for the reason April shared. Being able to offer some flexibility to department heads, to allow them to move some funds from one line to another, in ways that would sort of not require them to come to the finance committee and ask for FinCom transfer. I think all of that's a good idea, and I think that it was the primary motivation for me to do this. I think, at times we've discussed another potential benefit, which is that, it's a more simplified budget to present to the community. I think that's probably a less persuasive kind of justification for this, because I think, as several of you have already pointed out, we've already established that we're going to need to continue to have this detailed budget. And so, and people are going to need to have access to that, including, members of the community that are interested in kind of analyzing a more detailed version of the budget. So I don't think there's a lot of benefit in terms of a simplified presentation for the community. That doesn't seem like a super persuasive argument. But I think the argument about giving department heads some flexibility, leading to less of a need for FinCom transfers. I think that's all real. I think I think for me, the only reason not to move forward on this would be if, you know, Becky had a significant concern about like what it's going to require to actually manage this, and two, does this open us up to a greater potential for unforeseen errors and like inconsistencies that may be hard for us to pick up in the sort of busy, frantic, kind of like day-to-day moments of end of budget season, and would that potentially lead to some problem? I think we all sort of like, or at least I had this idea in my head from the earliest discussions about this, that this would be kind of a seamless process where we have a budget document that looks basically identical to the budget document that we've been using for years, and that's really the only document that we work on throughout the budget season. And then we reach a point towards the end of the budget season where we're ready to actually put together our warrant articles and our documents for town meeting, where we then have this simplified version of the budget. And it's not even something that necessarily requires a lot of work putting it together at that point, because we have this, you know, these two spreadsheets that are linked together. And so every change we make on the detailed budget triggers a change on the simplified. So that's my, you know, that was always sort of my conception of this. Now, in practice, maybe that's not realistic to think that that's how this can actually run. That like, and so sort of long response, but I think that's kind of that's my position right now, is that I think we should do this unless there are serious reservations on the part of, you know, Becky and, you know, the sort of town staff. I think that's where I come out. Let me go to Bob and then George.
Yeah, I'm against it, and I'll tell you, just to somewhat echo what you just said, I don't think that the goal of the finance committee is to simplify our paperwork and to make things, you know, let's just not have a budget saying, budget $6 million, spend it the way you want. No, we have an obligation for oversight. I'm exaggerating, but I think there's a tendency to think that simplification and making the document smaller is advantageous. I don't think so. I think that I like the way we did it before. I think that if we're going to engage in oversight of town departments, which is what our mandate is as a finance committee, we have to deal with the budget, as you say, and build the budget from all the individual parts of the spending that we need to undertake. And then we have to present that and defend that at town meeting as something we think is reasonable in the interest of the taxpayer to pass. And I think the town people, the voters, need to see that too. Because really, if one town department has an increased cost in one area of their budgeting, and we need to fund that, they might also have conceivably a reduced cost somewhere that we could also be reflected in the budget. And if the town chief or department head doesn't have to account for that to the voter, to the taxpayer, I think there's something lost. I think that accountability is central to our responsibilities and to the responsibilities of public employees. And also transparency. So this whole proposal operates against those principles, and it makes for simplification as a virtue, which of course it is in some respects. But I think that in the case of budgeting, the very important process of budgeting for the town of Shutesbury, we should have more detail, not less. I mean, the present detail is fine, but you know, I think that there's a reason why we have a history of the finance committee being a department head coming before the finance committee to request a transfer if some budget did not accurately reflect his needs. And I think that's a good thing, because then he has to defend the request to us and we have to approve it or not. And so therefore, I don't like this idea of simplification as a goal. I like the idea of detailed accounting and detailed analysis of the budget.
All right, George.
Yeah, I think, you hit on the point, the tipping point, and for me, the tipping point makes me oppose this. The tipping point is the amount of effort to maintain two schedules, the opportunity for error, as you pointed out, when we're adding lines and subtracting lines. Those are real. We look at a lot of materials that we distribute, we edit them as a committee, and then they get sent out. And invariably, there's always an error somewhere, and we're just going to increase the opportunity for error. And the other reason I'm against it is because I would prefer not to do it, is because it looks silly to me to present two versions of it on town floor. It's going to require coordination. I can already hear now. Look at the pink one, not the blue one. No, now look at the pink. And somebody has a question. We'll go to the pink one, and I can just see people getting confused. And we're producing a lot of extra paper. And when are we going to distribute it? Which ones are we going to post? I just think that the benefits of it, I think it looks great. And I like the idea of giving departments flexibility. We look at how they're spending their money, and they give us a full detail of how they're budgeting their money. And most departments, moving money around between accounts just isn't that big of a deal. There's just not that much money. I just don't think that it's worth the effort and the confusion that it's going to create. So I'd prefer not to do it.
Got it. Okay. Becky, I really like your sort of honest feedback about whether this is a sensible thing to do, or do you have concerns about it? Yeah, I think it's important that we get your sort of honest feedback on this.
Yes.
You're muted.
You're muted, yeah.
Unmuted. So I think that I was feeling like deja vu when we started in. We spent a couple months reviewing this about 7 or 8 years ago. We had the separate spreadsheet, and at that point we hadn't figured out the links and stuff yet, but nobody even liked the spreadsheet at that point. It was just rejected, I think, on what it looked like, but also it was rejected on the concept of, not having as much detail as people were used to. So looking at it this time, I think George is right. That looks clean. But if you look at the first salary line, it says select board, and you're looking at that $36,000 going, my God, these people get paid well. and you don't have a clue that almost all the money is going to the admin secretary. And unless you're got both documents in front of you. So that's the kind of what George was saying about the confusion and the people, and like the people that care and pay attention and are pretty much the only ones that ask questions. I can't see they're being impressed by this. I think they could be frustration. I think as far, I've thought a lot about how to not just link them, but reconcile the links, because that's what you'd have to do, is you got to go through and reconcile them each, for each presentation. And if you're only talking about like the last two, you'd have to do it in time to present it, and you wouldn't do it till you're complete. I think that's probably a few hours of work, but it's a few hours of extra work at the busiest time of the year. But if George is feeling that like it's this much work, and he's put the most amount of work in to date outside of Joe Markarian, that shakes my confidence. So I tend to agree with George that if he's thinking that it's going to be that much, it will be that much. And then what happens when you try to make a last minute change? If you go and make it one place and not the other, you're going to always have to, any changes will be
Well, you always
taking-
have to use those checks and balances that you referred to. You can
Yeah.
never stray from the checks and balances. If you don't look at them, you're going to find yourself in hot water.
Yeah, so it's gonna be, for the final month of the budget, you'd probably, start working on it then and then work through to make sure you have the final. But if there's any changes, and there's always a change at the last minute, it feels like. Do you think so, George?
If there's always a change last minute, and it's always high pressure. It always feels that way. We've made changes right up to print time.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had to reprint 800 copies.
Wow.
Susie probably has a bad memory of that day.
Susie,
I think that the moderator can have some input into simplifying the way the town meeting reviews, and he has, and so did Penny Kim before him. They look at lines in groups, and so I wonder if we had a detailed budget as we currently have, if he could move towards figuring out the simplest way to present them to town meeting. He may already do that. But the other thing is, whatever town meeting passes, that's how it acts as a budget. And so even if he figures out a way to more simply present it to town meeting by going to sort of bottom lines, that does not build in the flexibility for departments to move things around. One way that could happen is if the departments begin to submit their budget with more amalgamated lines, which is what Lenny did last time with equipment. He amalgamated the lines, and we could, since we're at the beginning of our budgeting planning, talk to departments about amalgamating the lines. And so instead of going to something that is a lot different, we could go to a way that allows them that flexibility. And we're still talking to them about the needs of the department when we meet with them, but we could talk about lines that pull things together so that they have the flexibility of moving it around.
so, okay, I have a follow-up question about that idea, but let me first go to Jim anyway.
Well, this is, George, I'm not a Excel computer jock by any stretch, but can't the two sheets, the simplified one and the detailed one, be linked in such a way so that if you make a change on the detailed one, it immediately turns up on the condensed one, like the one we see in front of us now? Maybe that's complex programming is involved in doing that, but that would at least eliminate the problem of trying to last minute wise, trying to get the two sheets to agree and not making any mistakes. I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, the links are there, and if you insert a row within the middle of a group, it'll happen automatically. But if you're inserting a new line at the end of the group, you have to make sure that the link picked up that line because you put it outside of the group, if that makes sense to you. So I got 5 lines and I link them to a single line. If I put one in the middle, the formula is taking the sum of all those. I put in the middle, I'm fine. But if I stick it at the end, it won't pick it up. And you're going to have to go to the summary sheet that we're looking on here and make a modification to the formula. So that's where the traps happen.
I see.
If Becky has I know as we get closer, she's got a page full of modifications to make to the spreadsheet. In there might be 1 or 2 of those things. And as she's going along, it's human nature. It's not Becky. It's human nature to make that mistake. The checks and the balance should help us find those things. And I'll certainly I've got check and balance in it now, but I could make stronger ones too. So we could address that. But like I say, accidents happen, errors occur, they just do. But yeah, to answer your question, it's how you enter them. And Becky's smart enough and experienced enough with spreadsheets. I think most people are. that they would know that they would have to go to the next page and just make sure that that new line they added didn't cause an error in the balances.
Okay.
The check balance.
Becky,
Oh, sorry. I'm really concerned that why we're doing this. I talk to department heads as they prepare the budgets. There's only a few budgets at all that have more than one expense line, that could be grouped together. And, I think Susie's right. In the cases I was talking to the assessors, we were going through to see if any of the software items that are the annual maintenance, if we could have a line that's just annual maintenance, and we might have two different software programs in them, or three. But like when we have changes, like we were going through those changes, you lose the capture of seeing what cost is going down and what cost may be going up, when you net everything together. So I didn't feel good about just consolidating them all in the budget, because that's the budget that you guys are going to be looking at, and it at a minimum. And I don't know, it just, I don't think the departments aren't asking for this change. Lenny had one issue that he inherited, and he had a new approach to look at it, which was great. And as Susie said, he was able to solve it without making any changes for the budget for town meeting. So I'm not sure, it kind of feels like we're solving a problem we don't have. But I do hear people at town meetings say the budget's too complicated. So I just can't gauge how much this could help. And is it worth trying it 1 year to see if people appreciate the budget more if it's simplified? But it seems that the people that want it simplified are the people that look at and review the budget the least. So it's hard to know. I don't know whether all this work would make any difference. I don't think it's solving the department's problems.
Well, that's important.
Bob,
Yeah, just to follow up on what Becky just said, I think, first of all, this whole thing, the process was, I think, the goal of the process was simplification and flexibility. So simplification doesn't seem to be the end product of this. It seems to be more complicated with this reform than with before it. So the simplification, it doesn't pass the test of simplification as far as I can see. As far as flexibility goes, I think that Becky has also pointed out that the department heads haven't required this. They're happy or satisfied with the system we have. And then in one case, Lenny came and made a suggestion, which the finance committee then adopted. So we don't need this major reform for flexibility either, it seems. So again, why are we doing this? I think it's going to be more complicated, more difficult to read because of its simplification, and harder work for Becky. And so I think it's not really, it doesn't really work. So I think we should table this.
all right, George, and then Jim.
Yeah, so I can remember what I was going to say. I think people are going to ask questions about lines, and we're going to just go back to the detailed one. So we're going to need the detailed one. And so I see no point in having two separate schedules. When we're at town meeting, we don't get that many questions about that many lines. When Paul's going through and saying, front page, pick a line, we might have two. And it's the same on every page. And so giving the detail isn't creating a lot of questions. I think hiding the detail is going to create more questions, and we're going to end up running to the detailed schedule. So at the end of the day, I just don't see that we're really buying ourselves anything. And I just want to point out, in that same vein, there are a few departments. There's 11 departments initially when I did this that had their expense lines condensed. So, fair amount, but for me, some of those departments shouldn't be, because when you look at the fire department and the highway department, even the police department, they got fairly substantial lines in their budgets. And burying, though, I won't say bury, I know that's the wrong word, but condensing it makes it look like we're burying them, but people aren't seeing the whole story. And the final thing I'm going to say is there are some other places. If we decide to go with this summary, I think there are other places that we can summarize, because I didn't summarize into a single line the departments that didn't have salary. And you can look at some of those departments and they got a lot of lines, but not a lot of money. It's not real big budgets. I'm trying to find an example. So, there's some inconsistency still in what we're looking at right now. And we might want to just go through and think about condensing, like general government has, it looks like 10 lines that add up to $27,000. There's no salary in there, so I didn't condense this one. So there's still some inconsistency in this design. So I wanted to get that out as well. But that's it.
Okay, Jim?
Yeah, I might be sympathetic to maybe separating the two issues, what it does for flexibility in every department by combining things, which I think is just complicated, and I'm not in favor of that. But maybe just as a sheet that would only turn up at annual town meeting, that would just sort of be an overview, and you could just bill it as an overview to give people a general idea of how money is being spent in town, sort of like the pie chart with a little bit more detail. I mean, I could see that being perhaps a good idea, but can easily be argued out of that.
Okay, April?
Oh, if one of my main reasons for supporting this was to help the department heads that don't want this help. So I think that message from Becky comes through, not being disrespectful, but just they would not find this helpful. But I just think this process that we've gone through has been a good one, that we've sort of taken this, this suggestion that our town moderator gave us, could we simplify it? And we really have explored it. We've spent hours looking at it and come back to this decision that I have. I don't think it's going to help. I don't think there's a problem. It's trying to fix something that's not broken. So particularly if the department heads don't want, this is not something that they're agitating for. And I would rather just table this, and maybe in 9 or 10 years, the finance committee can do this again.
Well, sir,
yeah, it's not a bad process. I think it's been a really, really rich discussion, and sort of, I think it's been valuable, but I think I can't support it the way I had.
Yeah. Okay, I think we've got a good sense of kind of everybody's view on this. The only sort of final point I'd like to make is I'm wondering if there's some other, kind of along the lines of what Susie was, where she was going, thinking about sort of other ways we could potentially help departments by offering them some opportunity to kind of shift funds from one line to another, or accomplish that. So Susie was talking about, well, maybe having discussions with departments about some amalgamation of certain expense lines that might be in their budget that might be beneficial. So that would be one way to do it. I was wondering, is there some process that looks kind of similar to what currently happens now when a department is going to need to overspend one of their budget lines? Right now, the practice, right, is they come to FinCom and ask for a FinCom transfer to make up that difference. Is there some kind of process where we could have a similar discussion as part of the FinCom where a department comes to us, but instead of it being a FinCom transfer vote, we actually grant them the authority to move lines for that 1 year from one of their expense lines to another line? So it's actually not an
We-
actual transfer of FinCom funds, right? But it's us fulfilling our oversight role and having a department head justify to us why they want to, for this 1 year only, want to move funds from this line to this line. Us deliberating about over that action, voting on it, giving them the approval to do that. Is that something that's possible and a
We
good
do it
idea?
now. We
Okay.
do it now, but we do it at the end of the year.
Mhm.
Right.
So why couldn't we say to them in their budget review meeting, if you're going on during the year and you feel like you're going negative in one of your lines, come to us, make a request. If you think you have funds in another line to cover it, and then maybe do it that way. I think the select board has to sign off on it too, not just the finance committee. But
Yeah,
Becky
select
can
board
answer
has
that.
to approve as well. It has to
But-
be both.
I think it's a good idea, AJ.
No, I do too.
Bob?
Just want to say, I think the years I've been on the finance committee, we've had this transfer of funds from our reserve happen on occasion. It's never been a problem, and we've never exhausted our fund, as far as I know, that till this year, where we had some issues with it. But it hasn't really been a big problem for the committee, so this might be another case of fixing something that really isn't broken. You know,
Like that.
I do think that people come to us that need more money for something. We review it, and if we think it's legit, we just we grant it, and they get some money put into their whatever line they need it in. So I think last year was an exceptional year, and we ran out. We were able to put money, refresh our account at the end of the year with some a line that was not spent, underspent. So again, I don't see a big issue here for a town head coming to us and saying, I need X number of dollars to address a problem that I can't fund from my budget.
Okay. All right, so I think I'll bring this discussion to a close. So unless somebody is motivated to make a motion to move forward with this alternative budget format, I think we'll just kind of consider this. I agree with April. I think this has been a useful exercise, right?
Yeah.
We got a serious suggestion. We took it seriously. We engaged it. George in particular did a tremendous amount of work. I'm grateful to you, George, for having done that. And we've had a serious deliberation about this, and I think it's ultimately resulted in kind of while we're not maybe not 100% consensus, but it sounds like most of us are leaning towards the position that this is going to create more problems than it's going to solve, and therefore not worth moving forward with. Is that everybody comfortable with me summarizing it that way? Is that
Yeah.
fair? Okay. All right. So I'm going to just close that document. And okay, so yeah, so I see no need for us to vote on this because nobody's sort of putting forward a motion to approve this. Susie?
Well, we do have on record a vote that said we would go forward with this style.
Yeah.
We did?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
you
voted
voted.
that.
Yeah, you're right. We did do that, right?
I think
okay.
we voted it in September.
Okay, no, thank you for reminding me. I for sure forgotten that we took that step. So okay, so then I do think this this does require a vote. So I guess I would entertain a motion to kind of continue with our current budget format that's in place now.
I would make a recommendation. I would make the motion that we rescind our previous approval of using a summarized budget format for town meeting and continue to present the budget in the format that we have historically. That would be my motion.
A second.
All right. Any more discussion, or are we ready to vote on that? Susie, your hand is still up. I think that's from earlier, right?
Right, it was just I was trying to find a date. It's September 5th. Rescind the vote of September 5th.
All right, George, you want to kick us off?
Urbanitis, aye.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Mosier, I.
Stein eye.
Okay. All right, thanks, everybody. Let's, next up on our agenda, Bob, I think it was at our last meeting, you had mentioned an interest in sort of working with a kind of a subcommittee to discuss some issues related to school choice funding. And I think I had asked you to see if you could come back to this meeting and sort of articulate kind of a scope and for what that committee would sort of be tasked to do. Is that something you're prepared to talk about tonight?
To some degree, yes. I would just say I did do some. I wish I had time to have done more research, but I was straight out this last 2 weeks myself. But yeah, and I've been on the committee for about 7 years, I think, and we didn't encounter the school choice issue because historically we had never participated in that as a town. I think till 2017, Becky, if I'm not mistaken.
And
We had 1 or 2 choice students then. It was brand new to us. It was done because they wanted to maintain, I believe that if I recall correctly, they would maintain the proper class size for some of our classes, which were too small, below the recommended size. So yeah, we didn't ever have to deal with it historically. So it came in a little bit of money, not much, but then over the last few years, there's been more choice students and more money. And it became an issue which I was interested in because like so many things with the school, like we obviously as a finance committee, we have a responsibility for all matters financial. And this is the school, of course, is the biggest item on our budget. And that school choice was not reflected in the budget documents that we received here at this committee. And so my concern was that it wasn't. So I wanted to know more about that. And I wanted us to be able to exercise some, not in any way oversight about how they spend their budget, because that's one budget, which I know I learned straight from the beginning, that we have nothing to say about how they spend their money. They have a budget. They have a lump sum of money granted to them by the taxpayers, and they spend it as they see fit. So whether it's choice money, taxpayers, Chapter 70, whatever, that's the school committee and the school administration's responsibility and their financial team to spend it as they see as appropriately. So that includes choice. But so just reading online about from the state websites and doing a little other research from Google and so forth, I realized that that there's this whole category in our expense report, which we've all seen, Becky has sent us this week, of other revenue to the school, which is a whole page in that expense report, which we never talk about here in Finance Committee. We talk about the budget, their budget proposal, and how we interact with them to develop a budget that would be presented to town meeting. But that whole page of revenues, and some are revolving accounts, and some are grants, and some are ARPA money and CARE money, and that's something that I think I would like to think that the committee should become familiarized with, should be aware of the scope and size of this money and how it reflects upon our budgeting process. And I would like to see choice as one of those items on that page. I'd like to see us look into that, and the committee had just become familiarized with that and what its implications are for our job. And I think that we work in concert with, we don't work in an adversarial way necessarily with town departments, but we are independent from their from their agenda. We have a slightly different agenda. It's checks and balances, as George said. But as far as the school choice issue goes, Susie and I did look into this to some degree last year, and I thought it was useful to both of us. I think, at least I can say that for myself. But I think it could stand some more investigation, because it's not just the way it's budgeted, which is the issue that I raised, and the way that it's reflected in the revenue stream, but it's also a long-term financial issue for the town, the school choice thing. There are towns like Pelham that have gotten really trapped into a cycle of choice, becoming dependent upon choice, and they have not been able to address what I see as a structural issue they have with basically just not having enough children to fill their little school. So we've seen a decline in our enrollment, as Becky pointed out last meeting, from over 200, I think, to what, under 100 are native students that we have in our K through 6 now, I think, as of last year.
150.
150, that wasn't what we had in the budget documents last year.
I think we had we haven't dropped 100 kids. We're
I
not.
can't quote it, but I think it was under 100. That was my recollection, Becky, so maybe I'm mistaken. But I know we had choice students in there, and we had also the preschool, which is another issue. I've never heard a word about from the school committee about the preschool and how it's funded and how much, how this preschool has now become consolidated into the K-6 in a way that was historically not true. I think that the preschool teachers are now paid employees that are under the contract.
They've always been.
If that wasn't, no, I don't think so.
No.
Was it?
Yeah, they've always been, Bob. It's just the funding comes outside of the appropriation because the preschool was a self-funded program, but the teachers have always been part of the union, part of the budgets. They've always been there, yeah.
Okay, well, this illustrates my point. For me, I'd like to know more about this, the way it works, how it's funded, how it all hangs together, so that we can understand it better. And I think that that would be a useful thing for a subcommittee to do, for this committee to report, to learn about this. The way we just learned about, we learned a lot about Chapter 70. Even though we didn't do anything, we did learn about something that's useful for us as a committee. And also we just learned about budgeting, and we had an interesting discussion about budgeting. And I think we could have an interesting open discussion about these issues, because this is a very important part of our town government and very expensive part of our town government. And we should have a handle on all the ins and outs about the funding of it. And I think that you make a point. I don't know that much about the preschool. When I brought the issue up in the past, I don't feel that I've gotten that much information. No, I've talked to a bunch of friends who have children, and I find that, every town does this differently. It's not as regulated as K-6, the system of preschool, but I'd like to know more about it, what it's costing the town to do this. And so I think that page would be an interesting thing to investigate. Other revenue and expenses in that page is an interesting page we generally don't look at or talk about at our meetings. So I would like to look into this further. I'm definitely going to look into it further, but if we had other members that were interested in the subject and we could form a subcommittee that report back to the committee, I think that might be a good idea.
April, and then.
Yeah, I think it's important that we don't overstep. This really is the school committee's responsibility. It's the budgeting of the school and all of that. But I think it would be, getting more education about how that works would be really helpful. It could be helpful. But I understand that the bump up in school choice, as I understand it, was when we started charging the schools of teachers who were bringing their kids. There were teachers who schools were not funding the school choice, that the kids were coming. I think that helped increase the revenue. But again, I think that this really is the school committee's purview, and we can get educated, but this is their purview.
I just disagree with you on that. They have a purview, and we have a purview, and they have an agenda, and they're very proactively supporting and advocating for the school committee. We have a different agenda, which balances their agenda in a way, or should, and that is to understand and to totally vet any financial issue that affects the taxpayers' interest. And so those are two parts of our government when we have our role to play, and they have theirs, in my opinion.
Okay.
Becky, and then Susie.
I just wanted to say, Bob, that page is a very important page, and I have found even during the years you've been on the board, that when we meet, especially when we meet with the school administration in January, with the local school administration, Questions are, we review numbers of questions about the grants that they are, what are the changes in the dollar values of their grants? They go through and they highlight which grants are not coming back at expected levels and what kind of pressure that puts on the budget. It's an essential part of the conversation most years, and I'm not going to say all years. I'm sure you're right that we've missed it some years, but there have been dramatic changes. That amount used to be closer to $300,000 or $400,000, and the last time I looked, it was closer to $2 million. So yeah, that has all kinds of either positive or negative impacts on how they can operate the full school system, and the finance committee should be aware of what situation and what status those grants are in to be able to evaluate the funding requests that they make. It's a critical page, and everyone should, if you are unfamiliar with it or you have questions that you haven't asked in the past, it's really important to get up to speed on that page.
Susie?
There is a lot of information in their budget, and we often get stuck in the details, but don't sort of see the some of the big pictures. Last year, we got their draft. I tried to present it to you as best I could, but there were certainly lots of questions. We sent the questions to Caitlin. We got the answers back. So the information was flowing better this year. One of the reasons I had a hard time following their explanation is because they hadn't sent me a copy of the budget. And so we already cleared that up as a problem. I will be going through it with them. But there is a lot of information in that budget about the grants and about things that they anticipate. And so I believe that it is not a lack of trying. It's sometimes a lack of having the question that works for you, but that's our job. And I believe we can. Maybe we need, as a committee, to go through the school budget more carefully together so that people can ask those questions, go through the draft and send those questions in. I think we're improving that situation. Caitlin was new. Now I can't remember when.
Last year.
And so she's learning how to package information to answer our questions. I feel we have a pretty good connection. I had to learn how to ask questions. I am learning. And I think we should have a session where we work on it and try to get the questions worked out and then look at the answers.
Yeah, I just want to quickly say as a follow-up, Susie, I think last year we did something new that I thought worked very well, which is we had access to a preliminary budget from Caitlin, and we as a committee reviewed that and formulated a set of questions. I believe you wrote them down, right, as we were talking, and then that I think really helped you go back and get answers to those, which were then answered before we actually did our budget meeting with the school. And so I think that was a super helpful change in the process last year that I hope we do again. And I think the onus is definitely on us to take seriously that first opportunity to generate lists of questions at that moment, as opposed to waiting until they're here for their budget meeting and then hoping to get answers in that particular moment. So anyway, Jim and then George.
Yeah, is there any way we could get on that sheet that we're all talking about? Is there any way we could get a little historical perspective of what we got for those specific grants and categories last year versus what they think they're going to get this year? Because that would, if we had that information, that would answer a lot of questions about how things are going. I don't think we've had that. When we were wondering about things, we'd ask the school committee, and the school committee would say, well, let's say last year it was this. And if we had a little bit of a perspective, a financial perspective on how that has been faring over the last year or two, that I think would be particularly helpful to us.
It is on the sheets. We get the previous 2 years and the current year, and we get it for revenue sources and we get it for expenses. There's history written there. I think maybe we'll learn. I think it's all a cumulative process. We learn how to do this, and maybe with these questions that people are asking, we know what we need to do as a committee when we want to look over their budget that they submit to us. The one thing that we needed added was more history on I think it was the ESSER and school choice. And
Yeah.
I talked to Caitlin about it. She said, sure. So what we did is we had our questions, they went back to them. They're happy to do this work for us. But I think we can, as a committee, should read over their budget with some of our own questions in mind, and we're going to find some of that information right there.
Well, it hasn't always been the case that all that detail has been there, but it's been getting better. I'm just saying that that's a very important ingredient.
Been there, it's there.
All right, George?
Yeah, I was going to say, we've had some pretty productive conversations with the school committee in the course of the last 2 or 3 years, and we did talk to them last year about showing those items that are funded outside of the budget that they're spending money on, and they, if I remember correctly, they committed to the principle that they would use those funds for one-time items.
Yeah.
And the ESSER money, the ARPA money that they may have, or whatever the version of the ARPA is that they had, and school choice, they were going to try to use them on one-time items because, as Bob pointed out, using those to fund the budget is structurally unstable. And you could find yourself relying on revenue sources to disappear. Now you've built something in your budget that you can't fund without a large increase. So I think we've had that conversation. One of the suggestions I think we made last year to them was continue to show those things below the budget, on the budget that you present historically. So what were the items that you spent those revenue sources on each year? What were they? I think is probably a good thing for us to have. So they have control of the money. They spend it how they see fit. We would like to see how that relates to the budget. Maybe we have no say, but it would be really helpful. And I feel like that school committee has been nothing but cooperative in that respect. And so I've been pretty happy about that. I do, however, to the first point that was brought, that started this whole conversation was, Bob, if you or other people want to join you and create a subcommittee to research this, more information is good. If you're going to find information, you can educate this committee. I'm okay with it. You can make a recommendation. We'll all digest it. If you want to put in that effort, I'm okay with it. I do think that school choice money should really be reserved for things that are one-time or temporary. I think, I know I've said this before, SPED is a great expense item. It's an expense item that causes huge spikes in our budget. We don't have anybody with a profound issue for a couple of years, and then somebody shows up and they need special services that push the envelope on expenses. That's where having that money in the bank, the choice reserve bank, really comes in handy. So that's something I'm always pushing for.
Okay, Bob?
Yeah, I just want to respond to what's been said here. I just think, that the school choice issue is a big one for me because I think there's $244,000 in there now, if I'm not mistaken.
It's gone.
Yeah.
Okay, it's gone. Okay.
It's on the expense report. It
says 244 and says that 52 was spent this year. That's what it says. So I don't know how accurate that is, Becky. That's my best interpretation. Again, yeah, I have plenty to learn. We all do, presumably. And we're dealing with a school committee this year that has new members, and they have things to learn too. We all have the same goals, basically. We're just looking to be accurate and to be fair to everyone, including the school, including the taxpayer. And, Caitlin has things to learn. We all have things to learn. I've been on the committee for only 7 years. I have plenty to learn. but I want to learn and I want to be more effective and more fair-minded about how I interact with the school. But when I ask for, say, enrollment numbers and I don't get them, whether that's an oversight, honest oversight, or it's just something that nobody got around to, or I need those numbers in order to do an analysis. And we used to get graphs every year of enrollment over history of, and you know, the number of choice students were added to that. And I don't think we got it last year, did we?
Yes, we did.
Maybe
And
after
it has the historical, it has the historical
Right.
history on it. And I also sent out the school choice policy and the spending that they were doing out of school choice. I sent that out. I'll send it out again.
I
These
don't
are-
want to
these
have
are
an argument. I'm
documents.
just trying to give you my point of view here, Susie. Like, I think more information is better, and I think the school choice is a revolving account, and that should support the budget. That's my view. That's my opinion. It still is. Their policy is their policy. We should have a policy ourselves, the finance committee. So
For school choice?
on school choice, whether how it's accounted for.
Yep.
Not on how the money is spent, but you know, it's not a slush fund for incidental expenses. It's a part of their revenue stream now. It's a
It's not,
serious,
but for the finance committee to have a policy on school choice when it's under the authority of the school committee, I don't understand.
well, if you read the school choice financial aspect of the school choice at the State Department of Education website, which I did today and yesterday, they say that they've delineated in their particularly obtuse language that we don't have any right to dictate to them how to spend the school choice money per se. If
Correct. You have
they-
no
But we
right.
do have the right
The
to,
FinCom would not have the right to write a policy on
well,
school
of course
choice.
we have a right to write a policy.
But you're dictating to the
Enforce it.
school committee if you write a policy on school choice.
No, we have our own responsibilities to provide a budget to the school, and we can calculate the amount of money in that school choice revolving account as part of our understanding of how much money they need to provide the services that they need to provide to our town. So it's not that complicated to understand that money matters.
I think I need to send you, and my scanner's broken, so I'm gonna have to print it out. I'm gonna send you the stuff that we got last year because it's not okay to say they didn't give us this, they didn't give us that. They did give us a lot of information, and you gotta sit down and read it. And if you want to do a subcommittee, I think that's up to you, but I don't think it's okay to say that we don't get information from them. And if you need more information, then we can get that. Because it's a process we're learning how to build. And I think we've done some good building, but you have to read the papers.
Susie, I read the budgeting information today, and I've read it last year and more than once. So
But you didn't read the things you were looking for when they came.
that is not true, Becky. It is
But
not true.
Why don't, but you
Sorry,
have
it's just
the
what you said.
population, the population numbers were given to us. And I have them and I can give them back to you
I
again.
got them last year because I asked for them at a meeting when the preliminary budget was presented to us, because they weren't in the preliminary budget. And so then it was an ask from the committee to the school committee.
That's right. So that's what the point of reading the preliminary budget is. And so this year, when I talked to them about the process again, I said, this is how we'll do it. This worked out last year, and we will need the enrollment figures included, and we'll need the ESSER and school choice history. All of this is cumulative and it's working because we're having
I appreciate your efforts,
conversations.
Susie, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying that what I'm trying to suggest is that I want more information. And as George said, more information is good. I'm not saying what to do with the information. That's a different discussion. I want more information about what the state guidelines are, what we're getting into, where it's leading, and so forth. There's also an interesting financial issue for this town. Something I want to think about and I want to address in my own mind. So, because when we make these decisions, we have to look at the big picture. Where are we headed? Becky seems to be sure that we're going to have young couples moving here with 2.2 children each, and the school's going to be flush with students again in a few years. Maybe that's true. I don't know. But I do know where we're at now. I'd like to know where we're at now and what the trend is. That's all. So I did ask for that information last year, and I was frustrated that it wasn't in the original documents. But you're right. There was some transition going on in the the financial director of the region was new. The cast of characters in the school committee is always changing. We had Dan, but now Dan's gone, so we're going to have more changes this year. So yeah, I just wanted more information. That's all I'm looking for.
George?
Well, I raised my hand because on our budget sheet that Becky passed out in recent days, it shows that we started the year with $244,444. So call it $244,000 in school choice, of which 52,466, call it 52, has been spent in the first 4 months of the year, presumably. So 192,000 remains, but 52 into 244, if they continue to spend at the rate that they have been, we're gonna have like 50,000 left over at the end of the year. So, but there's revenue coming in. But listening to this conversation, I just want to say, Susie is our representative for the school committee. She's well aware of what your concern is, and I trust that Susie will have that conversation with them. I know that the budgets they presented in recent years have improved in this area, and we've seen what they've been doing. I recall, and as Susie said, they showed a couple of years of history. So I think we've been moving in the right direction. I think it's going pretty well. And when we look at it this year, if it's not satisfying, what else can we ask for? We can talk about that after meeting with them. But Susie, you understand what we want to see. We want to see how they're spending those funds and what their plans is for those funds. So, Bob, I think we're a lot closer than you think we are. But I think when January comes around and we look at their budget, and Susie's going to their meetings, and I have nothing but confidence, Susie, that you're going to communicate this to them, this conversation. And I don't think we need to ask them to do a whole lot more than we did in the past. I think if they execute what we asked for, I think you're going to be satisfied.
Great.
No, I think the thing that improved last year is that we drafted a list of questions, very specific questions, that we then delivered to the finance director through Susie. And that's, I think, what made a big difference, was our ability to, and the step that we took to articulate very specific questions that we wanted answers to. So, Becky.
So Bob, I'm just curious, you were saying you want more information. So I'm just wondering, it sounds like you want information you said to identify what trends are happening, to be able to have a sense of what direction the town is moving in. Are you trying, I'm just trying to understand what more information, how that will be helpful, what the purpose of the information you're looking for is. Oh, you're muted, Bob. Sorry.
First of all, I shouldn't conflate two separate things. I want more information. I need information from the school when they perform their budget, when they present their budget, and I'd like to have it in a way where I can look at the thing and analyze it and then look into the different aspects of it. Last year, you're right, with a little bit of confusion there because of the transitions that were going on with the region, but we did end up having, through Susie's offices, so it's an opportunity to send questions over to them before they met with us with their budget. But I would hope that we could see their draft budget as early as possible so that we could prepare those questions completely, and then maybe have a chance to discuss the draft budget amongst ourselves and talk about it, look at it, and then send questions over there, give them time to process those before we meet with them in January, I guess. So what is that the schedule? That's the information I want. I want information that we were able to get last year. I want it in a timely way so that we have time to process it, and they have time then to process our recommendations or our questions before we settle on a budget together. Does that answer your question? As far as the other issue that I might have conflated, Becky, I want more information because as a member of the finance committee, as a citizen, I want to know where we're headed in terms of education, because for the last decade or more, there's been a demographic shift in the state, and our student populations statewide, or at least in Western Mass, have gone down. And so we have to look at that as an issue that has to be addressed from finance committee standpoint, as what's the long-term trend here? Where is this headed, and what does it mean in terms of education and funding of education and the efficiency of these facilities, and how do we address, if this is a permanent long-term shift, how do we address that? We have to look at that well before it lands on us completely. So something I'm interested in is that issue, the issue of where we're headed. And school choice is one sign to me, which is kind of a warning sign. Why are we doing school choice? Because of enrollment issues, I think. It was April said we had the issue of the students. Well, someone come up with the obvious idea that we should make the teachers, children, choice students, and get
Right.
something out of it. That was a great idea. It helped a little
That's
bit.
right.
But it wasn't, the issue of school choice came before that. Then that idea came after the school choice was already introduced. And that was something that I think the town did reluctantly at first, right, Becky? Joyce?
The town voted against it for,
Yeah, right. So I think we should be
15 years.
talking about this because it does have financial implications for the town. And it's a reflection of the trends that we have to come to grips with, maybe, or at least talk about.
yeah, and maybe we could have a chance to talk, Bob. I don't want to go back and forth with you right now.
Yeah, we should. We'll talk. We'll have a few beers at your office or something.
All right, let's move on. So does anybody want to join Bob on this kind of research effort? Any volunteers? All right, sorry, my Zoom is really laggy tonight for some reason, so I'm not seeing any hands up. So I think, Bob, you'll just sort of keep us kind of posted on what you're learning, and what I would just say to you is, if you want to add updates to any agendas in the future, just keep me posted on that, and I'll reserve a slot on the agenda for you to kind of brief us on what you've learned.
Okay, thanks for your forbearance.
Okay. All right. Project updates. I know there's a big culvert update. Anything else, Becky, that you wanted to bring us up to speed on?
I think I'll stick to the culvert today.
Great email, by the way.
Minor. I'm sorry, what, George?
Great email. Last Friday's email with the pictures, that was awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, it's happening. Nothing's going to stop it now. We're almost there. The road bed is, Jim reported this morning there was still a big dip in it, and Jim reported tonight that it's all the way done. Jim, is that right?
Well, when I saw it over the weekend, yes, it was graded out. I didn't see those photographs, incidentally, that you took. I guess maybe it didn't go to everybody on.
Do you get town announce?
Oh, that's probably.
That's what it was. Was it?
Oh, it was in town. Okay, I understand.
I can forward it to you.
Sure.
And
Okay.
if you want to sign up for town announce, you'll get some more. It was
Okay.
the second set that I had done. But no, the road bed still has to be built up then, I guess. And then today, all the riprap and securing of the west slope and the outlet of the culvert was completed, and on both sides, on the right and the left side of the stream. And so now what they have to do is complete the loam and seeding of the east side, the side of the culvert that faces the dam. And then they can pave the road and put in the guardrails. And hopefully in a couple weeks, we're going to open that road, and hopefully a little bit before the 17th, but I don't want to count on it. Because you never know what's going to happen.
We got a foot of snow.
right, a foot of snow. I
Okay.
was like, it kept coming today and I was like, oh
Yeah,
my
it's coming
God.
down pretty good.
It melted as soon as the sun came out.
Yeah, but I went down there because it was sticking to the trees this morning,
Yeah.
halfway down to the lake, and but they
Oh.
were still just going for it, working hard. If they can continue working, they will keep working, and they're determined to get it closed out. So I think
Hey.
we're in very good shape.
Becky,
I have an issue to bring up, AJ. Did you have a question?
No, I saw April has her hand up, so it's
Oh, I'm
gonna go
sorry.
to.
No, it's not, I just wanted to, the personnel board has chosen members, to be on, there's a town administrator contract negotiation that has to be done this year, and the really fun one is the police union negotiations. And this committee needs to have people on those two committees. And I wanted to volunteer to do the town administrator if that would be okay. And somebody else could really have fun with the police union, which isn't terrible, actually, but
Bob's done the police union.
Yeah, I've usually with me and the police.
I've done the police union too.
me too.
Yeah, I'll do the
All right.
police. Becky, we basically just tabled it last year, right?
I'm sorry, I'm not following. Tabled it last.
Last year, we never completed the negotiation, so did we just revert to the
We
old?
completed it 3 years ago, 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
3
last year we
years.
were meeting in the spring.
No,
Not the
It's okay.
police.
not
Well,
with the police union.
Oh,
The police chief was maybe a year and a half ago.
yeah,
The
Yeah,
police union was about 2 years ago. I was on both
Yeah.
of those.
Yeah,
And-
because the police union felt like it went forever. Cause
it was. We had that new guy, the big guy.
Right, that's right. The Bruins fan.
yeah, Jamie somebody, JD,
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah.
We got to know him, April.
but he's,
But we never
he-
finished it.
still
did we?
have him, but we're gonna have all new
Yeah, we
police
did.
officers.
yeah, and
Yeah, no, we finished it.
so it should be interesting.
Yeah, so April, we need just one FinCom representative on each of those committees, okay.
Yeah.
So, sounds like we've got April volunteering for the town administrator negotiation committee and Bob for the police. Is that, everybody comfortable with that? Anybody else wanted to participate in either of those? All right,
I'm
great.
participating in the.
Thank you.
I think we're just a year out from police and 2 year, yeah, police and fire chiefs will be next year, I believe.
That sounds right.
But I wanted to bring
Okay.
up, I wanted to make sure not to forget, the select board is talking about holding a special town meeting in the early part of January. There are a number of reasons. The Concom bylaw is one, and the other significant one is legal expenses. We're still cranking, we've on the lawsuit for the planning board. That's gone in, we're going to be now heading into discovery and having to hire experts. I should shut my mouth. I'm not supposed to talk about this. Anyway, there are expenses coming up for legal, and by January, we will be completely out of money. We probably will be out of money by November.
Wow.
We're at 78% spent.
Yeah. Yes, we
So-
are.
Wow.
So we should anticipate, Becky, that we might need to do a FinCom transfer to cover us for the period like November until this special town meeting.
Potentially, yeah. We'll see.
Okay.
We still have money left. We'll see. I just have to see where everything falls this month. Or
Okay.
close out October. No, October, it looks like we're still fine. It's the February. When we receive all the October bills in November, we're potentially going to be over. And we'll need to
Okay.
do a transfer. So yes. And also I wanted to get the date of January 16th on everybody's calendars.
or the,
That's the special town meeting date?
Potentially, yes.
16.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I guess if the FinCom is going to be wrestling with some money for this, we need to sort of understand what the options are. We need to understand the size of the hole and then the ways to fund it. So I hope that becomes clearer as we get closer to January.
We should, yeah, and we should be able to project those. We should have estimates about, we have some estimates about the bylaw legal. We have some background work that we can use to figure out, to project the lawsuit potential liability going forward with the information we got this month. And then I have been struggling to control some town officials' use of town council. So I am working hard to get a handle on that, to control just regular use. Because we're in extraordinary condition situation. We can't be using town council as freely as some folks have been. So we're really trying to tighten up across the board, given our situation here. And finally, yeah, there's likely to be other issues at the special town meeting. So I wanted you aware of that. And secondly, I know 2 of the assessors are on your committee and will probably report, but on the 8th of November, the select board will be having the classification hearing, and as well as reviewing the means tested exemption for seniors. And so those might be interesting topics for finance committee members if you want to tune in that night.
That's next Wednesday, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's from 5:45 to 6:20 are the 2 assessor issues.
That's good to know.
You said 5:25?
Mhm.
5:45, I'm sorry, from 5:45 to 6:20 on the agenda will be those 2 items that you guys will
Yeah,
be.
and I'll be attending it for sure.
And I will as well. Because George and I attend all meetings together.
Yeah, apparently.
One other thing to kind of related to mention is that somebody, I can't remember who it was, maybe it was Susie, forwarded me a message from the building committee that they would like their budget for FY25 to be increased to $25,000. So we don't have them on our schedule, but I think we need to add them to, because that's, if I'm not mistaken, isn't that line is usually $10,000? Is that right?
20.
Did it
It's
go to-
usually 20.
Oh, it's usually 20. Okay, so it's 20 to 20. Okay, anyway, I think we should I should follow up and just ask them to have a representative come to one of our meetings, maybe the 28th or the 12th, since we only have one department that we're meeting.
Did you
with.
receive a document from them?
No, just an email. Who did that? Oh, let me just see. I can't remember.
Steve, I think it was Stephen Domas.
Yeah, Stephen was talking about it. Yeah.
Sent an email.
That's right. Yeah, it came on October 20th. Okay, so I think what I will do is I will respond to Stephen and see if he's available on one of those 2 dates, and then we'll discuss it then. But I think I'll ask him to to just kind of write down a request, just write down some details in terms of what they're asking for and what that increase, that proposed increase will be spent on. Okay, so that was one update I wanted to share. Any other sort of, I guess we're doing more kind of miscellaneous updates.
Well, I'll finish April's report on the personnel board. The other thing is right now, we're hiring an assistant town clerk that was approved in last year's budget. That process is happening. And Becky, do we have an update on the equipment operator that we're also hiring for? We were close, right, to hiring somebody?
Yes, we had an intern this summer who has just getting his CDL license, so he has to get he's in close conversation with a new highway superintendent. He's working on getting his CDL, and we're hopeful that this is we're also taking other applications at this point too. So Steve has been talking with people and not come to a resolution yet, but hopefully soon, as currently it's been a two-man department for a month now, so it would be really helpful to get a third man hired.
How long before this fellow gets a CDL, do you know?
I think he might have gotten it in last week. I'm uncertain, but I think Steve, he was getting close.
In
He
time
had-
for winter is the good news.
I'm sorry? What, Bob?
Snow is coming.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, in time for winter. That's the good news.
Yeah.
So, and then there's the assessors. We met since, I think our last meeting, and we're still working on putting together the tax rate. There was some forms that needed some modifications and we need to approve. I hadn't seen any notices yet to approve those forms yet. So we're still in the process of setting the tax rate, not us, Dave Burgess with Leslie. And I forget the other guy, Rogers, I think is his name. But I did want to no, what was it, Peggy?
Roy Bishop.
Roy Bishop, that's it. So I did want to make reference to the email that Becky sent last week about the new revenue source of the Airbnb, VRBOs, the rentals in town. And one of the things I'm going to look at in the forums or ask David and Leslie about is what estimate are they using in setting the tax rate for that? Because that's revenue we did not count on, as Becky pointed out. And if they come up with an estimate and they put in that in our miscellaneous revenues, that's going to lower the amount of the increase of our tax levy. So Becky, you had mentioned in your email $14,000, $14,436. You haven't had a conversation with the assessors about what they might estimate for the current fiscal year?
I don't know.
Yeah, you don't know. Okay, so
And they don't estimate, that's left up to the accountant, isn't it?
well, I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, that's the nitty gritty.
I don't think they are responsible for that. I think it's the accountant.
Well, I'll ask them what they're using though, because again, and I'll ask them if they used an estimate for fiscal 23, for fiscal 24. If they haven't been, and now they are, this is really great news. I did a back of the envelope calculation, and we underestimated chapter 70 by 6,400. We underestimated new growth by 31,000. If this 14,000 is new revenue that the assessors are going to use, we're looking at $52,000 less of a decrease than what we projected and reported to the town. We said 172.
But you're mixing valuation with revenue.
No, not valuation, revenue.
Well, new growth is, okay,
No.
it was new growth you said.
No,
Okay,
the revenue from new growth.
revenue from this.
Right. We use 40,000 new revenue. It's really 71,000 new revenue. So that's a $31,000 pickup. So I'm just saying, we want to be conservative when we make our annual report and we report what we expect property taxes to be and the tax levy to be. And we have been. It's working out, and that's good news. If this 14,000 is what they use for an estimate, we've cut it by a third, which is great news. But I will hopefully have better information soon. Maybe not for the next meeting, but certainly the meeting after. But it's good news. We don't get to talk about that very often.
Great.
That's it for assessors.
All right. One other quick update is capital planning is meeting. Our first meeting is on November 13th. Susie.
I'm a little confused. Are we doing committee reports? Because I have I had a school committee meting to report
Yeah,
on.
we've sort of jumped to that. If it's okay with you guys, we had an expense report review on the calendar, on the agenda. But we're sort of up at the 2-hour mark, and actually I have to drive Portland tonight, so it's gonna be a late night for me. So if it's okay, we'll table that one to the next meeting and just get right into committee updates. Yeah.
Remember, next meeting, we
One
have
last
people
thoughts.
coming. Right? Don't we have our first meeting with?
On the
departments?
14th of November,
Yes.
next one, police.
Yeah.
Fire.
We should talk about that as well, just in terms of
Highway
plan.
police.
Yeah, it's highway and police. But before we get to that, Susie, do you want to fill us in on any school committee updates?
Yep, so they met October 19th. And I brought 4 topics to them as a result of our meeting. And yes, we rescheduled them for the 30th. And we agreed on the same approach as last year, where we'll get the draft budget. We'll share it with our committee, we'll raise questions, we'll send it to them, and we'll get responses, and we'll have the history of ESSER and school choice, and and I told them that we want the population numbers. People asked in our committee about the Union 28 situation, and there's 2 angles to look at. One is that they are Irving voted to study the pros and cons of leaving 28. They're going to have public meetings. It's quite a bit of a quandary because Union 28 is also forming a search committee for the superintendent. And so how you define what that job is when there's a loose a town on the loose, that's going to be tricky, and who sits on it, because there should be members from Irving, and so you can tell that that's a pretty big tangle, and we don't get to know how Irving will resolve this. We don't know a timeline, and Irving lost an override vote for 1.8 million, I think. So the problem is not strictly the school committee. It's a town that's struggling. The other thing you asked was about the teacher contract timeline. And that is the teacher contract. They'll be working November, December, and January, and they start with an LEA bargaining agent, and the school committee is in charge of the process. They're picking members to do that as well. The other good news there that got brought up was that rural aid. Oh, wait a minute, one more piece was that they got one of those grants. Can I remember the name of the grants? Remember that kind of grant, Becky, they got where they looked at a topic, they got to choose a topic to look at, and they looked at operational efficiency, and they got the report from that examination, and the recommendations were to bolster the leadership staff and to work on single contracts and policies, because there's this talking about how Union 28 operates. It also recommended, the report recommended that they fully regionalize, and the Joint Supervisory Committee will start talking about what does that look like? How do you
Oh
do
my
that?
God.
I know. That's what happens when you ask for some consultants.
That was the Collins, the
Yeah, Collins, right? That's it.
Collins Center.
Yeah. And it's not like they all said, great. It's something for them to now think about, but actually thinking about it in a time of really uncertainty. So, oh well. The other piece was our enrollment in the district was decreased a little bit. And in the 5-year rolling average, our percentage, it looks like it's going to be 22.16. the rural aid, the first time it came out, which now I don't, oh, these numbers don't work for me. Oh yeah, in 2021 they got 20,000. 2022 they got 22,000. 2023 they got 30,000, and for 2024 they're getting 86,000. And you might have been hearing the legislators working on improving the rural aid, making it a component, bringing it to the state, getting the legislators to agree to it. So then I asked the pointed questions about, is there any restriction on how rural aid is spent? And the answer was no. And that is 26,000 over what they projected. They thought they put 60,000 in the FY24 projection, so it's more than that. One of the thinkings of rural aid is that in rural districts, the transportation costs are more, and that would also impact the out-of-district placements. Those placements have a bigger transportation cost when you're a really rural town. The principal is considering about some of the ESSER funds that are dropping out, whether some of the rural aid would be used to plug some of those holes. And that's where that's at right now. We could be advocating, and I said, would some of that be available for the out-of-district placement costs that we didn't anticipate in FY24? So I raised some of the possibilities, and they gave me some more possibilities, but of course they're not at the deciding point yet. The population, the Jackie Mundonza spoke about it. She says the enrollment's low. It's now 115 kids. This is the October 1st number, 115 kids, and that includes the school choice kids. Somebody's threshold, I now don't remember. If you have less than 15 kids in a class, oh, that's for whether you can bring, that's the school's policy to bring in, to allow school choice. The school choice policy is really a perk, is especially a perk for the teachers. So that is part of its rationale. It makes teachers happier to work in a place if they know their kids can be enrolled in the school. But as we talked about earlier, there's lots of different aspects of school choice. Jackie projected that there are not very many houses on the market, and there were renters that left town because the owners of the house decided to sell it in the high market. And I asked if there was a statistic on kids that choice in and kids that choice out, and or charter out. And she sent me to the DESE website that said school attending, let's see, it's school attending children report or something. It's just like, how can the state make those kind of titles? So I went there and I couldn't figure out what I was reading. It wasn't clear at all. But those are some things that if Bob wants to stump around in the DESE, there's tons of tables. Good luck figuring them out. But to me, that's a question. How many kids choice out of Shutesbury to another town, and how many kids are choicing in? The last year's numbers were maybe I won't go look for it now. That I have that sheet that the school sent us, who's choiced in this year and what the total. I think the total was 124, and I think, yeah, and 20 of them were choiced in, and I don't have how many of those are teachers' kids. And anything else going on? Nope, I think that was about the things that you asked about, and then thinking about rural aid, which we actually should probably thank our legislators for supporting and moving that along, because that's a big jump. When it started at 24 years, 5 years ago, and now it's at 86. And like other fundings for schools, it's not reliable. And so that's that's a problem, how far in you can incorporate it into your budget. Maybe it's going to be reliable now. I don't know.
Great, thank you, Susie. Any other committee updates?
I want to ask Becky, can you text me Steve's cell phone, because I want to meet with him. I've been trying to find him, but he's always out working. Steve
Oh,
cell.
Steve Sullivan? Okay,
I don't know. Are they working Fridays now?
no.
Yeah, text me his-
Actually, I've had Steve working part Fridays. I mean, he's been helping with the culvert. So
Yeah.
he's been, but
Yeah.
not all day.
I've been busy myself, but when I happened to go by there, I did talk to some of the other guy, one other guy, but not Steve, who's never around. So I'd like to call him just to find out when he's going to be around, so I could meet up with him and talk about.
And you can just leave a message at the highway number 2 and he'll
I'll do that.
let you know. But
I didn't want to leave a message because Tim was on the answering machine. I didn't know if that was right.
Walter's still on the fire department answering machine.
As long as they're reading the messages, they are, right?
Somebody's answering the phone.
Okay.
All right, our next meeting is November 14th. We have on our schedule that we're meeting with highway and police. My suggestion is that we do for this year, for meetings where we have 2 departments that we're meeting with, that we schedule them for 7 and 7:45. I think in most cases that'll be plenty of time. So Becky, could you make sure that the highway and police department know? I guess we can do highway at 7 and then police at 7:45, unless there's some
Yep.
reason about that. Okay.
Yep, I got it written down. I'll make sure they know.
And the liaison can also,
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can do.
And I'll ask as a liaison for him to provide us a preliminary budget for us to
Yeah.
meet for the meeting.
So that was actually another question I had, was Becky, you haven't received their budgets yet, have you?
I haven't seen them, no.
it just
Alright.
ended October.
Yeah.
And
So-
and Kristen's been out she has one of those things that you can't come to work with. So
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure I hadn't missed it. Okay, so hopefully we'll get those in the coming days. All right. Is there anything else that we need to discuss before we adjourn?
2 real quick things. Becky, for our next meeting, could you give us an update on which departments are missing in terms of budget submissions so that the liaisons can follow up with them?
yes.
I would like to do that. And then the classification hearing, it turns out I have to be out of town on Wednesday, but I can attend that remotely, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a hybrid meeting. Select board, I think, well, except for the ones that have COVID, will be in the hybrid meeting.
Yeah, the numbers are rising again. The medical centers are going to be requiring masks very soon.
Yeah. Yeah, we had 3 people.
They're on the verge of it right now.
And
Einstein.
It's 3 out of just the regular people in town hall. It's a lot. So everybody stay safe and healthy.
I'm going to avoid
Yeah.
town hall.
And I got the booster and I think it might be helping. So if you haven't gotten the booster and are thinking about it, because I was exposed a number of times about 10 days ago, and I think the booster, it makes you feel really sick, but it
That's
can.
great.
24 hours and then you're okay.
So I'll make a move to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Right. Let's do a quick roll call.
Arvanitis, aye.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Got you.
Mosier, I.
Fine, and safe driving to Portland tonight.
Thanks.
Yeah,
right.
careful.
Yeah.
Be careful. All right. Good to
See
see
you
y'all.
guys later.
Take care.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Hey, lunch. Oh, are we recording?